Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really cool production follow-up for you guys from the brand Ocean to Orbit. A little bit about them. They're a newer microbrand upstart founded by two car designers based out of Melbourne, Australia, with a shared passion for mechanical wristwatches, whose conversation on historical expedition watches led to the idea of starting a brand with the goal of creating a piece designed to withstand similarly harsh conditions, but in a versatile modern package inspired by watches worn by the great pioneers and explorers of the mid-20th century. This falls into the category of an everyday adventure watch. Some key characteristics in design language when you're looking for something within this genre. Of course, you want to find something that is sporty, legible, and tough. This is their Lhotse in the blue steel colorway, and it is named after a mountain in Nepal that is actually the fourth highest peak in the world, and one of the original prototypes of this watch was actually put to the test by a brave Nepalese mountaineer who successfully summited Lhotse back in 2022. This goes for $895 direct. It is Swiss made, and I have to say I was really impressed with the prototype, and I'm really happy to report back that the production units are even better. So the original pre-production prototype I reviewed was actually a black dial model, which looked gorgeous, but this steel blue, wow. For me, it just strikes an elevated chord, and I really am enjoying this one. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so some of you are probably wondering, what is it about this watch? And I have to say, it's nothing specific. It's not like there's a particular vertical where this really excels in. It's just the overall package. Everything just comes together for me. I mean, look at this, the light play in that vertically brushed dial. You almost get a really cool kind of gradient effect depending on how you're tilting it. And I don't know, there's just something about that. Again, it's just unoffensive and super versatile while still, not feeling boring or generic, which I can really appreciate. Now, in terms of the dimensions here, it's 38.5, which I feel is like the perfect size watch for this type of watch, right? Without a turning bezel or anything like that. I think this looks great. It's 11.5 millimeters thick. And I have to say that doesn't feel ultra thin. It doesn't feel overly thick either. It just feels really well balanced. And when you take a look at this case profile, I think it's pretty hard to argue with the fact that it is extremely well balanced. I mean, look at that. It's nice and flat, but you do get a nice subtle kind of curvature in terms of the way that it's contoured to lay on top of the wrist. It has a 47 millimeter lug to lug, which again, a bit of a sweet spot, not overly short, not overly long. It just hits, again, just a bit of that kind of Goldilocks space. It is stainless steel, mainly brushed with some nice polished accents, as you guys can see here. Let's take a look. Let me actually give it a quick little wipe here. Okay. Let's see those beveled edges. Very nice transitions, guys. Nice and sharp. And not only are the transitions nice, the brushing itself is quite nice. I mean, it's not Omega level or anything like that, but I will say it is really well done and above the level of just your typical kind of basic tool watch finishing that you might find on something as simple as, like, let's say a Hamilton. Now, getting into the crystal here, this actually has a nice box dome sapphire with an inner AR coating. I do like the use of a box dome. You can see, although it does give you just a slight bit of physical height. Visually, it doesn't really give you much at all, but it does give you a nice little play at harsher angles there. I mean, while still remaining very, very legible because of the box style where, I mean, essentially most of it is going to be flat except for the edges. Now, getting into the crown, it is a screw down crown, nicely signed. You can see there that very cool Ocean to Orbit logo. And of course, the brand, if you're new to the brand, which I'm sure many of you might be, essentially it's, you know, from the ocean to the orbit. So everything in between air, land, and sea, to including, you know, up into the sky and space. So I think that that's really cool. It's essentially, you know, it's a purposeful moniker, and it's not just something that's meant to kind of sound cool or look visually engaging. It actually has a purpose behind it, and then it also happens to look pretty cool and be, I think, relatively engaging. You know, O to O, ocean to orbit. You know, I think it opens up definitely a lot of space for them to eventually make as dedicated dive watches, pilots watches, anything like that. I like that they leave that kind of door open, but with that kind of through line of saying, okay, well, these are meant to be pretty robust, adventurous, and of course, ultimately versatile to be worn every day. Now, in terms of the movement, although you can't see it, I have to say I love this case back. Nicely done there, little stamping, and again, it's that really cool, well-balanced logo, and then you do have a bit of etching with some more information. Actually, let me see if I can angle this and get a nice, there we go. So, very, very cool. You guys can see quite simple in its execution, but I think still really quite well done. Now, the movement inside that's beating away is actually a Swiss automatic STP 1-21, which is a no date movement. So you're not going to have a ghost position, which is great when you are setting the time. And this is actually has replaced the older STP 1-11, which is still an ETA kind of 2824 SW200 clone, quote unquote. It does offer you 40 hours of power reserve, which is, you know, a bit better than the typical 38 hours of power reserve, and still beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour. I personally have not had a bunch of issues with STP, and I do have a good amount of experience. I typically have kind of stuck to more of their higher end pieces that they put into Zodiacs, which is kind of more of an in-house affair for the Fossil group. But I will say in this application, the winding action, everything has been definitely up to par to what you would expect from an SW200 or an 2824 from ETA. So nothing to complain about there. And again, this is a Swiss-made piece, so it's going to have that Swiss-made movement. And for some of you, you know, you might just see a watch that's like this from a new brand and think, hey, well, that shouldn't be $895. I will say, guys, if Longines put this out, this would cost a lot more than $800. I mean, even if Tissot made this watch, it would cost a lot more, just to give you guys an idea. Like, that is the level that I think this is executed to in terms of its fit and finish, as well as just the general design aesthetic is just really quite lovely. And I personally, of course, that's very subjective, guys. But yeah, I think it looks great. I've seen and handled a lot of watches. I own a lot of watches, and this definitely is a design that's absolutely resonated with me. Now, getting into the dial, of course, you have that vertically brushed dial texture, applied indices. There's no date, so everything is very balanced, very symmetrical. You're getting Swiss Superluminova BGW9. You're getting 100 meters of water resistance, or 330 feet. And that is, you know, of course, you backed up by a nice screw-down crown, which is great. 20 millimeter lug width, nicely drilled lugs, so you can swap this out. But I will say I do really like this solid 3-link bracelet that has very short links. You don't even need half links because of the length on this. And then it is actually very articulated, fully articulated almost. Actually, no, it is fully articulated. Check that out. So very, very nice from that standpoint, which is going to lead to a lot of comfort, whether it be on the wrist or just transitioning on and off the wrist as well, which I can appreciate. You're getting screw pin construction, which, you know, everybody loves. And here you're going to have a very nice fully milled push button clasp. Even the buttons are really nicely milled, and it does have nice chamfers. Let's go ahead and give it another quick wipe here. And you do have that nicely signed logo there. It's actually been shrunk down a little bit from the pre-production prototypes, and I think it looks great. One drawback that some may say is that, hey, it doesn't have toolless micro adjustment. Now, from my understanding, they do have a toolless micro adjust clasp in the works. This one works completely fine, especially considering you do have very short links, and then you do have a wide array of manual micro adjust positions. I don't mind this at all. It flows really beautifully, and I'm sure once they do get a toolless micro adjustment clasp going, it's probably going to add a little bit of thickness there. So for me, this works absolutely beautifully. But with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I think this wears just beautifully. Check that out. Nice lay there on the wrist. Nice wrap. As you guys can see, beautifully flat without feeling like ultra thin or pancake-like, which is very nice. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens here, you're going to get a fair amount of perspective distortion. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame so that you guys can still get a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And as you guys can see, I think this wears just beautifully. Now, although my 7.5-inch wrist is on the larger side of average, you can see it's quite a tall and round wrist, so it's not like it's super wide and flat and accommodating. And I have to say, this just wears great. It reminds me a lot of my 39mm Neo Vintage Omega Railmaster. And that might be by design, because from my understanding, that is a model that, they did take a lot of inspiration from. And I think this just looks great. It just works. It definitely gives me some Aqua Terra vibes. It also gives me some Oyster Perpetual vibes. And, at the same time, it doesn't look like an homage, right? At least not a direct homage watch. It definitely pays homage to a lot of those models, and they're not shy about that this is, to be made within a similar vein, but, with their own design language to it. And I think they do a great job. You have that beautiful applied logo. And yeah, this thing just looks really, really clean. Even you kind of have like, rocket-like, hour hand there. And I think this just looks very, very good aesthetically, quite pleasing. And in that brushed blue dial, I think it looks great. It definitely ties in, of course, to the beautiful brushed steel aesthetic here, feeling quite sporty. But then you do get a bit of an elevated level of visual interest with that very cool dial texture, which doesn't overpower, isn't super loud or gimmicky, which is nice. It just fits and flows and feels like a purpose-built tool watch, but not one where they kind of stopped where they needed to. Instead, they decided to keep going on and really add an enthusiast touch to this piece, where there's definitely a lot to like beyond just the kind of general aesthetics and capabilities, to where I think it does even trigger an emotional feeling. I get excited to see this watch, to wear this watch. And yeah, that's something that is, of course, is very personal and very subjective, but it's one of the things that make me just get really excited about this piece. So yeah, with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you guys can see, really outstanding loom that goes above and beyond your typical kind of field watch, and definitely ups the ante in terms of, hey, yeah, if you wanted to use this in some deep water as well, you would absolutely still get that legibility, or of course in trying times in darkness. Now, whenever I do these types of, loom shots, I always do like to work in a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And as you guys can see, my goodness, check out that dial. Very dynamic. So here, pretty much pitch black, right? It's a black dial. The lume, although it's, you know, technically has some light on it, it's not really luminous. This is a contrast of the white against the black, right? That's at least perceived as black. Then you get into a bit of a midnight kind of blue tone, and then bam, when you really get reflective, it still is quite legible though, which I really, really dig, because you do have those reflective surrounds, which can pick up, you know, some darker contrasting colors and whatnot, whether it be off of the polished handset, reflecting a little darkness there. So you do get a nice outline to still give you a fair amount of legibility, which I really like. And I just like the transition there. I mean, look at this dial. Ooh, it makes me wonder if they would ever do a gradient dial and maybe do something like a special edition where you get a little bit of that, but where that's just fixed, where it's just kind of baked in to always look like that, because that is a good look. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that dynamic styling that it has already, I can absolutely appreciate. I mean, I love that you got basically a black dial, and then you get kind of this really deep midnight blue, and then boom, it's almost electric. So I really, really dig that. And of course, you're still going to get all of this great luminescence, which is really beautifully executed. Another thing that they really got right when they transitioned from pre-production prototypes to these nice production units. You guys can see there, the blue is very consistent, whether it be on the handset or on the indices, and it's very consistent even in a well-lit situation as well, outside of darkness. So you guys can see there, it just reads and renders very, very cohesive. And that's probably the word of the day for this watch. I mean, the cohesive design, everything really, really comes together on this piece. So again, it's not any kind of one feature where I feel like, ooh, this is why this watch is so great. It's really just how all of these little design details kind of come together to create something which I feel is fairly special without feeling loud, which I just can appreciate, because I enjoy the good wild card watch. I enjoy a nice kind of watch that is going out of its way to do something different. What I can appreciate here is, although I can see that they went out of their way to do something different, they still kept it quite restrained. They kept it quite versatile, and they erred in the side of modernity, which I like, right? With so many watches now that are just very much vintage inspired, which is great. It's nice to see something that still feels quite contemporary and doesn't necessarily feel as niche, if it were to really focus on really overly paying tribute to any particular design aesthetics of the past. So for me, guys, closing thoughts on the wrist: really perfect Goldilocks sizing, giving awesome Aqua Terra meets Oyster perpetual vibes. In terms of model variants, there are 4 standard colorways available, that were available at the launch, plus a 50-piece limited edition, which I'm not sure is still available, but that was a really cool one. I personally really, I'm a big lover of blue dials. I think they're just really versatile, even more so than a black dial, at least within, kind of my color palette and my attire for kind of daily wear. So I really dig this one. In terms of comparable models, the Lhotse definitely fits in with some of the similarly themed top microbrand offerings from the like of Traska, Baltic, Clemence, Halios, and even Christopher Ward. I actually recently did a kind of 3-way comparison between the Baltic Hermetic Tourer and the latest Traska Summitier, and that was a whole lot of fun. Again, this really held its own there. And yeah, I could easily see somebody kind of cross-shopping this along with some of the best options that are out there within the independent microbrand space. So for me, guys, bottom line, while it does lack the convenience of a toolless micro-adjusting clasp, at least for now, the design and execution still make it a contender for a top option within the ultra-competitive go anywhere, do anything watch under $1,000 segment, especially if you value the Swiss-made execution and if this design aesthetic ultimately is something that resonates with you. And I think that it hits a really nice balance in terms of, again, feeling familiar while also not feeling derivative. And I like that a whole lot. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do like. And if you haven't already, please do hit subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.